So welcome everybody. We are going to do our last session on introduction to coding environment for Python. And I'm now going to hand it over to Nayeon to talk about IDEs.
Hello, my name is Nayeon. I'm so sorry I'm not feeling very well today, so I just decided to keep my camera off. And I'm a track lead at Women Who Code Python. Let's get started by defining what an IDE is. What is an IDE? An IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. IDE is software application that provides comprehensive facilities to computer programmers for software development. An IDE usually consists of at least a source code editor, build automation tools, and a debugger. Some examples for Python are idle, Spyder, PyCharm, Eric, Vim, etc. In this session, we're going to focus on Visual Studio Code versus PyCharm versus Anaconda. So first, Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a source code editor made by Microsoft for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. It delivers an extension-based structural design. It also provides on-the-fly pop-ups showing the documentation for classes and methods. Visual Studio Code has also a feature called Minimalist Zen Mode. Here are some features for Python. Visual Studio Code supports Python 3.4 and higher, as well as Python 2.7. It comes with code completion with IntelliSense. IntelliSense is a general term for various code editing features, including code completion, parameter information, quick information, and member lists. IntelliSense features are sometimes called by other names such as code completion, content assist, and code hinting. There's also a linting feature, so Visual Studio Code supports several linters, including PyLint, Flake8, MyPy, PyDocStyle, PP8, etc. Then there's also other kind of support such as debugging support, code snippets, unit testing support, and automatic use of Conda and virtual environments. And there's also code editing in Jupyter environment and Jupyter notebooks. I'm going to show you a little demo of Visual Studio Code. If you want to experience what Visual Studio Code is like, but you don't have it installed, you can Google Visual Studio Code for the web, and you can kind of follow this. However, Visual Studio Code for the web comes with very limited features. You'll probably want to install Visual Studio Code later if you don't have it now. So here I have a very simple Flask app that's currently running on this local host. And it's a really simple app that just shows hello world. So this is the Python script that we have. And then inside a folder called templates, we have home.html. What is really good about Visual Studio Code is when it comes to web development, we need to do some markup with HTML. And Visual Studio Code has something called Emmet or Zen coding, which is we can basically simplify the process of writing HTML. For example, if you want to write 3 spans inside of a div, usually you would probably do something like this. And then you copy this 2 times more. But Visual Studio Code has mf in it, so we can do div, and this just creates 3 scans inside a div. And also it comes with really great extensions such as Prettier, which is a really popular code formatter that automatically formats your HTML, CSS code. And then to talk about IntelliSense, I mentioned before, it is something like this. We see all the recommendations or like suggestions based on the type of list, which is the type list. So it shows what kind of built-in methods are available to execute on the list. Also, Visual Studio Code is very well known for its great extensions, such as you can see, this is something called Git Lens. Which is a very good feature for people who use Git. So this shows who edited this line and when did they do it, and then it also shows like a part of the commit message. So this it has very good like built-in feature for Git. So let's look at the pros and cons of Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code, or VS Code, is an open source extensible code editing software generated by Microsoft that can be utilized for Python applications as well. I see a hand raise. Oh, okay. If you have questions, feel free to leave a question in the chat. I'll go over it after the session. So VS Code offers a very good Python development environment for professional web developers. You can add extensions to make a Python development setting. As we have seen, it also delivers support for embedded Git control, and also like IntelliSense, like completion of code, debugging, syntax highlighting, code refactoring, and snippets. So Visual Studio Code is exceptionally well designed, and its foremost benefit is that it delivers an extension-based structural design. Because this IDE is a lightweight IDE, it can be prolonged by adding sequential components as required. And some of the notable features of this open source code editor are that first, Visual Studio Code is highly customizable and extensible through which we can insert debuggers, languages, and themes. And also it has a commanding debugger, and the users can debug from the code editor itself. And as you have seen before, it supports autocode complete and syntax highlighting feature with IntelliSense, which finishes syntax based on variable types and function definition. And it has a really strong integration with Git. the version control system. But some cons, initially it takes some time to launch, and examining with Visual Studio Code is extremely slow. So this is the Visual Studio Code for the browser, and it actually has this links show you the code for the app I just demonstrated. However, the bad thing is that we cannot actually run this app on the Visual Studio Code for the web. So if you want to try this out, I'm gonna share you the slides so you can try this on your own in locally installed Visual Studio Code. Now moving on to PyCharm. So PyCharm is an cross-platform IDE established by the Czech company JetBrains. An experienced Python developer mostly utilizes PyCharm, and it is believed to be the best IDE for Python development in Windows. This intelligent code editor can be used on Mac OS and Linux systems. And also this software comprises an API that can be employed by the developers to transcribe their Python plugins so that they can prolong the straightforward functionalities. Python really stands out from the competition due to its productivity tools like quick fixes, auto code completion, and tools for data management system. And in addition, it provides a very good Python development environment for test-driven development, right? And it is obtainable in 3 versions: the educational or EDU version, the Apache licensed community version, and the professional version. The first 2 versions are free of charge as they are open source, while the professional version is paid. The community version is very fascinating as it has diverse features such as live code verification, syntax highlighting, and auto-completion. But the paid versions contain more advanced traits than the community version, like complete database management and support for web frameworks such as Flask and Django. So let's look at a demonstration of PyCharm. This is the same code as we had on Visual Studio Code. So here, this is the navigator of the project. And if you want, we can also hide some toolbar so that you can just be focused on writing code. And then what is really good about PyCharm is that it recommends some PEP internally. For example, what I mean by this is that maybe let's say we have a very long inline comment. Like this, it has some suggestions even for comments. Then you see this line. If you go beyond this, it says PEP8. This line is too long, so it complains. And also, if I try to save this file without a line break at the end, it'll also complain, saying that no new line at the end of the file. So it directs us to the specific PEP while suggesting some code styles. And if you hover on it, it has some features that enable us to reformat the file automatically. So some pros. So there are many and various framework support. And PyCharm is a really smart platform when it comes to error detection, auto code completion, and quick fixing. And it has a customizable interface that increases the productivity, and the cross-platform development enables developers transcribe script on diverse platforms. So because of this, it is considered as one of the best Python code editors. But some cons is that the default setting may need adjustment before projects can be employed, and the loading time is sometimes sluggish. And also it has support for, as one of the pros, it has support for prevalent web frameworks, web technologies, version control, and scientific libraries. So now let's move on to Anaconda. Anaconda is a distribution of the Python and R programming languages for scientific computing. It aims to simplify package management and development, and it also includes data science packages that are suitable for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Let's take a tour of Anaconda Navigator. This is the home, and here we see a lot of tools such as like PowerShell prompt, and we also have Jupyter Notebook, and we can also have RStudio and many different tools for data science. And in the tab, you have the community, and you also have access to Python tutorials. I'm going to do a little demo of the Spyder later in the slides. So some pros and cons of Anaconda. So some pros is that, so first, it provides easy access to software like Jupyter, Spyder, R, and Qt console. And then installing Anaconda is said to be easy, even without much technical knowledge. Anaconda comes with Anaconda Navigator, which is the prompt we saw before. It is a terminal-like utility where you can easily install packages and libraries. So launching Python IDEs as well as Jupyter notebooks from Anaconda Navigator is simple, and Anaconda makes it very easy to keep these packages up to date. And it is also easy to navigate through files in Jupyter and also to install new libraries. Also, if you don't want to install the full version of Anaconda, you can opt to install a lightweight version, which is called Miniconda, that includes less Python libraries and only core Conda, so you can save space that way. So some cons is that some people reportedly had some trouble installing specific Python libraries, such as TensorFlow and TensorBoard via Anaconda on a PC. So Anaconda lets you create environments which allow you to install specific versions of Python and associated libraries, so you can keep your environments separate so they do not conflict with each other. However, some people ended up having to create several different Conda environments just to use TensorFlow and like TensorBoard and other specific libraries to avoid errors. And as you can see, this sounds pretty annoying because every time they wanted to run a specific model or like specific stuff, they would have it had to open up the specific Panda environment with the appropriate Python libraries. So let's do a comparison between Visual Studio Code versus PyCharm. So Visual Studio Code is more modular, and Visual Studio Code is great because it only needs to know what type of project you're working on, and it'll automatically enable the required plugins. On the other hand, PyCharm is specifically tailored for Python. So you'll have to go for other IDEs for other languages. And also it is worth noting that PyCharm is very resource intensive and performs much slower than Visual Studio Code. So consider PyCharm if you'll be working mainly with Python, but consider using Visual Studio Code if you need to work with multiple languages and want the flexibility to customize your IDE. Next, PyCharm versus Anaconda. So PyCharm provides smart code completion, code inspections on the fly, error highlighting, and quick fixes, along with automated code refactorings and rich navigation capabilities. So it is an IDE that includes built-in support for Anaconda, but then we mostly use Anaconda to work on projects that are very data-driven. So PyCharm's huge collection of tools includes an integrated debugger and test runner, Python profiler, a built-in terminal, etc. And in addition to Python, PyCharm also provides first-class support for various Python web development frameworks and specific template languages. And it also integrates with IPython notebook, and it has an interactive Python console and supports Anaconda, like I have mentioned. So the main purpose of PyCharm is that it wants us to make it easy so it helps us to make it easy as possible to write clean, efficient Python code. And it also comes with very great refactoring feature, and it has a lot of built-in support for most popular Python frameworks. So it has intelligent coding assistance, built-in developer tools, and web development support, scientific tools, and it is overall a customizable and cross-platform IDE. On the other hand, Anaconda, it is not necessarily an IDE itself, but it's more like a platform. It includes an IDE, but functions more as a platform for a variety of data science utilities. And in Anaconda, you can also use Jupyter Notebook. And you can also choose which Anaconda supported applications to install, so it is lightweight. And because of this, you can improve performance as you don't have to have unnecessary features that you do not use. And like we have seen during the tour, it includes learning and community resources in app. So consider Anaconda if you want to perform only data science tasks with access to many data science packages. And consider PyCharm if you require flexibility to work on different types of projects, but still have the need to use Anaconda for a data-driven project. So PyCharm and Spyder are both cross-platform IDEs featuring many helpful and intelligent features such as code completion, etc. However, Spyder is a lightweight IDE specifically designed for scientific Python development. It is included in Anaconda, And while PyCharm is more resource intensive, more powerful for programming, Spyder is considered simpler and lightweighter. So consider PyCharm if you plan to build a large, complex applications where you'll have a need for features such as version control, code snippets, safe refactoring, and even an integrated project browser. And consider Spyder if you want a lightweight developer environment specifically for scientific applications. So here's a demo of Spyder. I apologize for not already having this open up. I had it, but somehow it just like closed itself. So this is what the Spyder looks like. Here's the code editor, and this is a console, and here you can also, when you declare a variable, you can see the fields of the variable. And if I copy and paste some Python code into it, it complains here because this is an invalid syntax. However, it does not show us like the documentation, just like Visual Studio Code showed, just like Visual Studio Code has. So in conclusion, Spyder is a lot more lightweight, but PyCharm is more powerful and resource intensive. So I feel like this session is shorter than other sessions. So I apologize because like I haven't been prepared very well. So and
thank you, Nayeon. That was very interesting to see like the various IDE. So we're going to take any question that people have. There is one already, and Nayeon and I will answer. So Michelle asked, do you like Spyder or VSCode?
Personally, I like Visual Studio Code because I'm the type of person who likes to have as many things as possible, no matter if I use all of them or not. And Visual Studio Code has a lot of amazing plugins for Git and not just for Python, but also like for JavaScript. So if I need to choose only one Visual Studio Code for any language, then I would go for Visual Studio Code. However, personally for Python, if I'll be working on a Python focused project, I'll go for PyCharm.
Yeah,
what
that
about
would
you,
be
Jessica?
my advice as well.
Yeah.
I used PyCharm for many years, and I'm switching to VS Code for two main reasons. First, one of the issues with PyCharm is that when you start PyCharm, it's indexing all of the files on the project. And I was using a VPN, and I was taking forever over SSH. So I switched to VS Code, which didn't have this constraint. And the other reason, like you mentioned, is it was easier for me to switch between like Python and C++ and Rust and other languages instead of having one IDE for Python and one for C++ and so on. One thing I want to mention though, if you're starting up, I would say PyCharm is a bit easier because you don't have to deal with extension. Everything is already there for you. You just need to like discover it. So that makes it a bit easier to set up than VS Code, for example. So Spyder, it's interesting if you, like you mentioned, if you do a lot of data science and you don't really want to deal with like setting up an environment and things like that. Everything is kind of like all in one, and you get all of your libraries as well.
Yes, and I also see another question in the chat, which I think is already answered by Stephanie. But if this was a question specifically to me, I do teach Python classes for people, especially because I'm a college student who is TAing for computer science courses. And one of the courses I'm like unofficially TAing for has Python in it. So I do teach Python, and also I do give some Python related workshops at Women of Code.
There is something like girls who code and things like that who have things more targeted toward like pre-teenager to teenager. If that's what you're looking for. So there is other group which target various ages when it comes to Python.
Yes, we have time for additional questions. Feel free to ask me anything about Python or like coding. I don't have a lot of experience, but I still would like to answer. Are you in North Carolina, or do you teach online? I am currently in Massachusetts, and because my college is in person, we only have like in-person classes at the moment. So I do go to in-person labs and in-person classes to help people learn Python or even a different programming language called Java. You would like your son to learn Python? Personally, I think when you're just starting out learning how to code, it's good to have a tutor. However, I think it's as important to learn. It's just as important to learn how to be independent in your learning, so that you don't be very dependent of your tutor, because most of the time, I think learning how to code involves a lot of like time fighting with yourself. So oftentimes you probably will face some situations where you cannot just figure out what an error is. But it is something that nobody can teach you. It is something that you kind of need to like figure out. So I would say if you're just starting to learn Python, then I think I would recommend that you probably like take like a MOOC, like the online course that are provided for free. And then if you feel like you still need any like additional support, then that's when I would say that's when you can like find a tutor.
We do have another question. So somebody asked, do your companies have policies about writing code with VSCode, Python, PyCharm, or the code editor, as well as policy in structure with code? Do you want to answer that, Nayeon?
Yeah, I can answer this first, and then I think Jessica can take on this next.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, yes, it depends on the company. Some companies have I think most structured companies will have something called developer documentation, which lies all the like style guide for developers. So Visual Studio Code, PyCharm, or other editor. Yeah, and so personally, the companies I have worked at didn't have like a strict style guide. However, some companies required you to use a particular lint. Lint means that it's like the style corrector. So it really depends on the size of the company and how the company works. So in short, generally, yes, companies have policies about writing code.
Yes, I can chime in a bit on that one. Most places have been asked, do you have, like Nayeon mentioned, style guide? So it's how do you want the code to look like for various languages? And like what the policy sometimes is what you put, which type of header to put. Some companies are working at copyright headers for like just for like legal reason. Some companies don't have this one. That can happen with like, it doesn't matter the size, but mostly if it's non-tech or very far away from tech, they might not have that. Most places will follow PAPE 8 because that's just easier, and there's a lot of tools who can check for that. You have Palints, you have Black for formatting as well. When it comes to which editor to use, from experience, I was able to use whichever one I wanted. However, there is a catch with PyCharm. PyCharm have two versions. You have a community version as well as a paid version. We have a debugger and things like that. In some places, they did not have the budget, for example, for PyCharm professionals. So I was using PyCharm community or another IDE. That's why VSCode is a bit nicer because it's free. So you don't need to deal with budget and things like that. You might run into some issues when it comes to installing extension if you don't have permission. So that can depend on your company. That's where Anaconda is actually rather good because it comes with like a lot of like data science and machine learning libraries already installed. So if you manage to have that installed, you already have a rather large tool set. So that's something which can be good for Spyder and Anaconda. So policy is mostly use whatever you want. At the end of the day, like we saw in previous session, code is code. You are just editing a text file. So it does not really matter which editor you are using. However, you may want, if you're a junior, if you're just starting up, you may want to use the same editors and the most senior one are using, just so they can help you a bit more easily. So that's something maybe you may want to take a look into. Yeah, and you have VSCode as well, which is an alternative to VSCode that doesn't have telemetry. So, which I encourage you to install that version actually over VSCode. You also have VSCode server, which, like Nayeon mentioned, you can run it on a web browser. So that's also very good if you use like a Chromebook or something like that. You can use VS Code through a web browser to bypass any kind of like administration, lack of admin rights on your machine if your IT department is really tight on that. I don't know if I have any other question.
Do you have any other questions about like, you can probably ask how I learned Python or like why I like Python or that kind of like miscellaneous stuff, or even just about just still about the differences between IDEs or like editors. And personally, for web development, I think I always use Visual Studio Code because I'm usually like coding in JavaScript, and Visual Studio Code has really great extensions for JavaScript.
Yeah, something about PyCharm that I also really like is if you're using virtual environments, you can actually manage your dependencies and install, do a pip install from PyCharm itself. So you can see what's in your environment, which version, upgrade them very easily. There is a very nice tool for that. Like Nayeon mentioned, there is a refactoring tool, and that one is really, really good. If you need to do like very intense refactoring of your code, that does really help a lot. It will like find every kind of like every call to a method and things like that, and you can change the method name across multiple files. So that's very interesting, and that's something that VSCode can do, but not as nicely as PyCharm.
And another question in the chat, foreign languages, different countries, for example, France, do they write code in their French language? Is English the norm? Thank you. This is a really interesting question because personally, my first language is Korean. And I know, so one of the articles I read recently said that, so there's someone who's like writing code for some funeral related stuff. And like if you're like bilingual or like multilingual, there are, you must know that there are quite a lot of words that are not really like translatable or like hard to translate. So for certain people, I know that they use their own language to name variables. However, usually English is the norm because if you think about the open source projects, if because like English is said to be the global language, so that is why like most open source projects are written in English, even the comments or like the README, so that almost like everybody can understand. But I think different countries, like different companies, probably there must be some companies that write code in different languages.
I did see some code written in Italian. I saw some code written in Chinese as well. I work in France for a bit. I'm Franco-Canadian. And in France, we was mostly English. Sometimes the comments were in French, so it was a mix of both. So it was variable name and things like that in English and comment in French. I did so that. To be a bit particular about your question about France and languages. So that can happen, but English was more the norm. Again, because English is the lingua franca of development and people are just used to it. It also make it easier to work with teams across multiple countries as well. I hope that answers your question. We do have another one, how to see the Python virtual environment on VSCode and PyCharm.
Do you want to answer the question, Jessica?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, go ahead on that one.
Oh, so virtual environment. So I have only if I remember correctly, for PyCharm, when you create a project, there's like an option to create a virtual environment, which is abbreviated as venv. And as you're creating a project, you can select the virtual environment and what kind of like Python interpreter you want to use for that project. And if I really wish I remembered all the details, but it's been like a few months since I wrote like a big
you have
Python
two ways with
project.
PyCharm.
So, yeah.
With PyCharm you have two ways. You can either ask PyCharm to create your virtual environment, or if you have one already, you can use an already existing one. PyCharm is a bit smart and it's going to detect for that. But like I mentioned, PyCharm have a very nice tool. If you go to file, there is like environment. You can select, you can actually create a brand new one if you want, and it's going to save your environment. For VS Code, you need to set it up outside of VS Code first. However, VS Code will detect all of your Python interpreter, and you can choose the one that you want to use. If you do have an environment already set, when you launch VS Code, it's going to detect that as the main one. Typically, you want to set your environment outside of VS Code. You can use the console within VS Code though when you do that. And for PyCharm, you want to use PyCharm to set it up. If you use Vion with that set. So if you use Conda or if you use your own solution, then you would have to set it up yourself.
And we see another question, which is Visual Studio Code or a code editor. Write in different language, does it translate? What is the extension? So is your question that if you write code in a different language, will Visual Studio Code or code editor will translate the language? Is that your question? French to English. I'm not aware of any extension that automatically translates a particular language to English. when it comes to like Visual Studio Code, but that's probably because that might be because of my limited experience. Jessica, do you know of any like extension that automatically translates?
Automatically, don't think so. I mean, I saw some, like you can use Grammarly, for example, in VS Code. So there is some editor that you can use, it's more like to fix grammar and things like that. I don't think there might be an extension, but it's going to be very experimental, and I don't think it's going to work very well. And yeah, is that your question, to translate comments written in English to French or the inverse? An IDE is not really the place for that, to be honest. So yeah, like I will use an external tool when it comes to that.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah,
These are
and
all
if your
great
issue is that you have a team who well, not like where everybody speak French, not everybody speak English, that's why I would say stick to French for your comment. That was the case for me when I work.
If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the chat or in the Q&A forum anonymously.
And same, if you don't have a question right now, or if you prefer to ask us directly, feel free to contact us after the session is done. On Slack, we are both on Slack, so you can reach out to us, and we'll be more than willing to reply to you.
And it looks like I can wrap up the session, or yeah, please join us on Slack. So please stay connected. We are VSCode Python. Please join us on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and also on LinkedIn. You can find more resources related to this talk on this particular GitHub repository. And for additional questions, please join our Slack channel, and feel free to tag my name, or just feel free to just post any question, and anyone will be happy to answer and help you with your Python journey.